we're gonna need a hat for this one. Welcome to Tokyo Tuesday. If you're a regular viewer, welcome back. And yes, I have the flu. Actually, I've gotten a lot better. This is maybe my second or third attempt at recording this video. The previous recordings are nothing that anybody would have wanted to see. I figured it might be a pretty good opportunity to get a video out to you guys about being sick overseas and talk a little bit about what to do if you feel like you may have gotten the flu, how to find a clinic, where to go, what happens if you don't speak Japanese, everything. So before we do that, let's step back just a little bit and let me tell you about the very first time that I ever got sick in Japan. I think the year was around 2007. I had just moved to Tokyo for the very first time. I traveled around Japan for an extended period of time before that, but I officially moved to Tokyo in 2007, and I think within my second month I had gotten really sick. And aside from the fact that all of my friends here in Tokyo were doing little stints overseas at that exact time and were not due to come back for 2 or 3 months, getting sick in a new country just makes you feel so far from home. Aside from like the language barrier, which was never that much of a challenge for me, I came to Japan pretty much with the ability to speak and, read and do a bit of writing in Japanese. But having to find a clinic and go to a clinic all in a language that's not my native language, having to go to a pharmacy and get medication and talk to the pharmacist, and even doing simple things like going out and finding, orange juice or tomato juice. There's tiny little things that you don't realize. Like when you're sick, there's probably a certain brand of, you go for the Campbell's chicken soup, or you go for this tomato juice or this orange juice or whatever it might be. Maybe it's homemade for you. But as soon as all of that is gone and you're faced with unfamiliar brands, no home cooking, and a language that is not your own, you feel further from home than you ever will. And I haven't actually felt like that for a while. And the other day I got hit with the flu, and at first I didn't think it was going to be the flu. At first it just started with a really runny nose, and I was like, oh, here's a good opportunity to do a catching a cold in Japan video. And then that night I got home, I decided to wrap myself in a blanket. In fact, this video here, I tried to shoot this yesterday, gave up, and ended up having to do the whole thing with me wrapped in a blanket because I just couldn't handle how cold I was. Anyways, and then when I took my temperature the next morning was sitting at something like 38.5. This sucks. Gotta go to the doctor. And that's between that and the incredible body aches and pains that I was feeling, I knew that I probably had the flu. I knew I should go and get myself checked out. The last thing you want is to be spreading that around. Now, after spending a couple days with the flu, I can confirm I wouldn't want anybody to feel like that. It has been terrible. Just to let you know, I am on the mend now. My temperature has gone down quite a bit. I'm still a little congested. The runny nose has pretty much stopped. But let's stop going on and on about me, and let's talk about what happens when you get the flu. You're going to want to go to a clinic and get checked out, confirm whether or not you actually have the flu. Now, in Japan, they have a very interesting system. I've actually never gotten checked for the flu back in Canada or in any other country. I've gotten checked for the flu twice in Japan in my time here. Once, it wasn't the flu. I just had a pretty nasty cold. This time, it was the flu. So what I wanted to do is just kind of walk you through what I did. Thank goodness for things like Google and Google Maps, because I tried to put myself in your guys' shoes and imagine if I didn't speak a word of Japanese. Maybe you do. Maybe your Japanese is absolutely beautiful, but I know that there are just as many people out there who will be coming to Japan for the first time, either to live or even just to travel or visit, who might not speak a word of Japanese at all. Then if you're clicking on something like, I don't know what I've titled this, something about getting sick in Japan or the flu or whatever it is. If you're clicking on this, then you probably want to know how to deal with things if you don't speak Japanese. I decided just to Google clinics right there on Google Maps, and I checked around, and I couldn't find anything was open. After a semi-extensive search and calling several places, there were only 2 clinics open on a weekend. I decided to walk in. Now, when you go into a clinic, if you want to get checked for something like the flu or anything like that, what you're going to want to do is make sure that you have your health insurance card. If you don't, you will be obviously charged full price. If you have forgotten your health insurance card, the most usual thing in Japan is for you to pay everything up front and then bring your health insurance card back and be reimbursed. Now, there is a certain time period in which you can do that, and there's also no guarantee that you'll be reimbursed for everything. There was a time that I had to go to the emergency room for something, and I didn't have my health card with me, obviously. I had to pay a couple $100 out of pocket, and had I had my health insurance card, that might have only costed me maybe $30, $40, but I had to pay the entire thing out of pocket, and then when I finally went back a few days later, they were only able to refund me about $100 worth of it. So if you do have a health insurance card, it is definitely worth keeping on your person. So once you get signed in and you let them know, basically what I did is I handed them my health insurance card. They tried to ask me what happened. I got a piece of paper. I wrote 38.5 and touched my forehead, and they were like, okay. They ushered me to a room at the back of the clinic where all the people assumed to have the flu were. Also, words like the flu, in Japan they just call it influenza. So if you think you have the flu or influenza, just say influenza. Enough with that sidebar. Then they bring out the stick. There's this stick, you see, and it's got a cotton swab on the end of it. And it is by far one of the more painful things that you'll ever experience in your life. And I've broken bones, okay? I have broken bones, and this is still one of the more painful things that I've ever experienced. What they do is they take this swab and they shove it right up into your nose. And just at that point where you think, okay, that's pretty much as deep as it can go, they manage to wiggle another inch out of it. It's brief, it's fleeting, but it is excruciating. They then take it out and they apply it to this little tester thing. It's got a section for influenza A and influenza B, and if you get lines in either one, it tells you which one you have. If you don't get any lines, then you don't have the flu. I probably could have looked up the difference between influenza type A and influenza type B before making this video, but if you're really that interested in it, I fully invite you to just Google it. So this time they came back to me about 15 minutes later and they said, "Congratulations, you have influenza type B." This clinic had a fantastic sense of humor. Actually, by this point, most of the staff were trying to do whatever they could to use English with me, which it was really nice. There was a certain comforting feel to it. And then I was sent in to meet the doctor, who very, very quickly picked up on the fact that I do speak Japanese. He had a big smile on his face. He's like, most of the staff think that you don't speak Japanese. I was like, oh, really? And he just grinned and got to talking. Now, this doctor said that while he could prescribe me a range of medicines, and while I could be doing stuff like taking medicine to reduce my fever and everything, that would only prolong the flu. He said one of the best ways for a healthy young gentleman such as myself to get rid of the flu is to keep my fever up as high as possible. He told me eat lots of warm and spicy foods, drink lots of warm beverages, and keep my body temperature up. I believe at one point during our conversation, he did say that if I worked at it hard enough, there's a possibility that I could kill off the flu in as little as 4 hours. Over the 10 plus years that I've been living in Japan, I've been to the doctor for several different things. I'm talking everything from colds to injuries and everything in between. But this particular doctor that I went to this time was super, super nice. He had a great sense of humor. And what he did end up prescribing me is something called Kampo. Now, Kampo is a Japanese take on traditional Chinese herbal medicine. Usually, Kampo tastes absolutely terrible. Like, I mean, absolutely terrible. But the Kampo that he prescribed to me this time had a bit of a cinnamon taste to it. So when I mix it with some hot apple juice, I ended up with like hot apple cider kind of thing. It was actually quite nice. One thing that I did forget to mention that is slightly important for this is that if you do get the flu and you work for like a company in Japan, especially like a Japanese company, I know a lot of Japanese offices tend to have tight workspaces, so you definitely don't want to be going into the office. Most Japanese offices will actually recommend that you take a minimum of 5 days off from the point of being diagnosed with the flu, just so that you're not going in and flu bombing the entire office and just wiping everything. Oh, it would just be absolutely awful. Anyway, guys, that is pretty much it for me on this topic. If you have stuck around this long to listen to me talk about being sick in Japan, not really the best or most interesting topic now, is it? But if you've stuck around this long, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Definitely, if you felt it was worth it, leave me a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, I would say hit subscribe, but really check out some other videos and subscribe, once you know a little bit more of me other than the sick version, okay? To the rest of you, don't let the last video you watch of me today be me sick, all right? I will see you guys again soon. Thank you so much. Stay healthy, guys. And I bet you thought I forgot about Tokyo Tuesday.